Welcome to Music Matters Podcast with Darrell Craig Harris, talking about all things music with celebrities, artists, music business insiders, and more.
Welcome to Music Matters, a podcast about all things music. And today I have a special guest and also a good friend, bassist Dave Swift, who's been the bass player for Later with Jools Holland on the BBC for many years and also on the radio, BBC radio programming. And how you doing, Dave?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a wet, rainy, cold day here in London.
Is it always?
Yeah.
I know. And actually, I've actually had a lot of great days in London.
No, we had an amazing summer, but today it's not nice. So it's a perfect time for us to be doing this in the nice, warm, comfortable home. So all good.
All good. Yeah. What part of London do you live in?
I live in it's southeast London. The actual area, it's called Charlton, and it's the closest place to where other people would have heard of is probably Greenwich.
Oh, okay.
We're 2 minutes away from Greenwich.
Awesome. I actually stay with my good friend Fiona Ross, jazz singer. She lives in Greenwich. That's a lovely little village. Is really cool.
Yeah, and it's very historic, and it's just nice to have it just down the road because it's Greenwich is very touristy. So if you live there, you have to deal with the tourists. Whereas if you live just a couple of minutes away from it, you can just go in and step out and visit it and things like that.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, I love London, and I've actually been recently going to London maybe once or twice a year. I'm really missing it. So hopefully I am missing my fish and chips and all the fun tourist stuff and walking around. But where are you from originally?
My hometown is a place called Wolverhampton, which is in the West Midlands. Again, people have probably heard more of Birmingham. Which is about 12 miles away from Wolves. But yeah, it's right in the center of the country, really. Also, it's where the very famous jazz bassist Dave Holland comes from.
Interesting. I interviewed Dave for Jazz in Europe. He's an awesome guy.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, that whole area actually has, obviously you have Ozzy and those guys and there's a lot of musicians that came out of that area.
Yeah, and someone that we work with a lot with Jools is a lady called Beverly Knight.
Okay.
She's a great sort of British sort of soul R&B singer, but she also does West End stuff as well. But awesome. She's from Wolverhampton as well. So yeah, it seems to be, there is the occasional hotbed of talent.
Well, hey, that happens everywhere. Actually, sometimes too, in unexpected places, which is kind of awesome. But how did you get into music? I know you had sort of musical family a little bit, right? Your brothers or...
Yeah, kind of, because neither of my parents played an instrument, but they both loved music. So my mom could sing as well. She had a very nice voice, and there was always music on in the house, whether it was on the radio or, we used to watch those MGM musicals a lot.
Yeah,
and they were always on TV, so there was always music going on. But both my older brothers, who are 8 and 11 years older than me, they both played guitar.
Awesome.
At home, so they bought instruments into the house, and my eldest brother eventually bought an acoustic piano. So they used to play just for their own amusement, really. They never played, as far as I know, they never played in bands or anything like that. It was just at home. But and they had great records as well that I would sneak in and listen to on the old dance set player, the portable record players. Yeah. So yeah, I guess it was my brothers that were the ones that were, really sort of bringing the music into the house as far as instruments go.
And did you, I know you play trombone. Was that your first instrument, or how did that happen?
Well, the thing is, because I tried my brother's guitars when I was at home, and I just found them too difficult to play and very painful. Those acoustic guitars, those strings are very uncomfortable for me. And I tried playing the piano as well, but nothing really grabbed me. But I always sang in choirs. I sang in the school choirs. I sang in the local church choir. So I was really into music. I loved it, but I guess I just hadn't found an instrument that really...
Yeah, your voice. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So when I went to secondary school, I really wanted to play the saxophone because I'd seen there's a TV series over here called Top of the Pops.
Right.
Regular weekly series, and they always seemed to be... obviously there was guitars and basses and drums, but there was always a lot of sax players, and I always thought the sax looked very cool.
Yeah, they kind of get the rock and roll glory right out front.
Yeah, exactly that. So when I was about 12, I went with my parents to one of these open evenings at my senior school, and I was really thinking saxophone. And then all of these older kids were playing like oboes and cor anglais and flutes, and I'm thinking, no, this isn't for me at all. Where's the sax? And it turns out they didn't have one. So the next thing I saw was a trombone lying in a case. And I've always liked unusual instruments. I've always liked things that are a little bit different. And I saw this trombone and I didn't know anything about it, but I just thought it's got a slide, and that really intrigued me.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool sound, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of quirky, and it was different to everything else. Again, there were mostly woodwind instruments there. So I put my name. So the school said there was no saxophone, so that was that. So I put my name forward for the trombone. But then I was told shortly afterwards they'd only got one, and they'd given it to another kid. But they gave me a euphonium.
Ah, okay.
Now, the thing is, the euphonium, it's a beautiful, because I love all brass instruments. And
that's a great sounding instrument, yeah.
It's very nice. But the thing is, I'm thinking to myself, well, you don't see many euphoniums in pop and rock bands on the TV.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know if the euphonium player gets the girls, but I could be wrong.
Exactly. So anyway, but I just thought, well, let's have a go at this. So I used to have joint lessons with a guy that had a trombone. We had the same teacher. And after... and I gave it a go, and after about sort of 3 or 4 months, maybe longer, I just thought, this isn't quite right, And then I gave up with it. I gave the instrument back, and then music for me was, I was still singing in the choir, but actually playing an instrument, I forgot all about it completely, because I just thought, well, if I can't have the instrument, my first choice, and I can't have my second choice, I just thought, what the hell, So that was it. I didn't bother playing anything after that for several years.
Yeah, that's awesome that that you have the singing background, because I'm sure too, being a singing bass player, which is what you ended up being ultimately, is like something that can actually keep you working. A singing reading bass player is kind of gold.
Yeah, well, this is the ironic thing. I was singing way before I played an instrument. So I was singing in the school choir when I was very little, but then I joined my local church choir. And in fact, it's quite funny because I've recently been contacted by a guy who's writing a book on that area that I grew up in, but focusing also on the church and the choir. And he's asked me to contribute to it.
Awesome.
And he said to me, well, how did was it your love of music that got you into the choir? I said, no, not at all. I said, me and a friend of mine we were really bored. I was 10, he was 12. We got caught throwing bricks at the church one day. Like little stones, and it wasn't anything against organized religion. It wasn't
right. Just being kids. Yeah, it
was kids being bored. We're just throwing bricks like this, board.
Yeah.
And then the vicar came out and he said, "Look, what are you doing? This isn't great. If you're this bored, why not join the choir?" And because I already could sing, so again, I was 10 now, so I wasn't playing any instruments at all.
Right.
And I went, yeah, why not? So I went along to the Friday night choir practice the next week, and I stayed in that choir for 9 years.
Wow, awesome.
I
love church music too. Like it's from a singing standpoint, it's beautiful stuff, right?
Oh yeah, and the thing is, I have to admit, it wasn't a religious thing.
Right.
I've got nothing against sort of, religion or anything like that. But for me, it was just, and I love the building, because even though I was technically throwing bricks at it to begin with. But,
yeah, we won't talk about that.
Yeah, but, it was the church where my mom and dad got married, but I just loved the building. And yeah, it was the music. It was just that kind of choral hymns, carols. I loved it, and I found it very moving. And I started off as a treble and moved to alto. Missed out completely and went up to bass. So I was actually singing bass parts way before I was playing them.
Interesting. And you're how tall are you? Because you're a very tall guy.
Well, I'm still one of the smallest ones in my family. I'm only 6'3".
Wow.
So my dad was 6'5", my eldest brother's 6'6".
It's funny because when we did our last live stream in London, we took a picture together. My wife is like, "How tall is that guy?" I'm like, "He's a lot taller than I am." I look like a little shrimp.
Yeah, my middle brother, he's the tiny one. He's only 6'1". He's the short one in the family.
Awesome. So how did you get into ultimately you got back into trombone, and then what was the bass transition?
Okay, well, what happened is, like I said, when after the euphonium, that was it for me. And the annoying thing about that is because I didn't then study music as an academic subject at secondary school, because I thought to myself, well, okay, so I'm not playing an instrument, and I'm thinking, how could you get a job as a musician? Yeah. Both my parents worked in a factory. There was no one in my family that were in the arts.
Sure.
So I just thought, what's the point in studying something if it's not? All I could think of was, as opposed to following my bliss and my passions, I was thinking of work.
Yeah.
So, it's that's what it was like for us at the time. So, and it's crazy when you think that I'm a professional musician, yet I never studied music as an academic subject. So what happened is, I picked all the wrong subjects. I should have picked like art, music, literature, acting, all those, and I picked woodwork and metalwork and all these subjects that I was terrible.
All the stuff where you can lose fingers.
Oh yeah, I mean, poor my wife Lucy. I think whenever there's any DIY needs doing, she knows not to ask me.
Right, watch your fingers.
Exactly. So yeah, but then when I realized that this wasn't happening for me, I got really despondent. I was around about 14, and I just got really fed up. I was good at sports. That was the only thing I excelled at, and I still love basketball and track and field to this day. But what happened is, I met the kid who got the trombone 2 years prior to this.
He stole your trombone.
Yeah. And he carried on playing, but with a new teacher. And I asked him, so what's it like? Because it's great fun. You get to miss a lesson each week. You get to band practice. You go on trips. And I said, you know what? I'm going to give this one more go. So I went along to the teacher, which is a guy called Philip Johnson. And I said to him, I'd like to play the trombone, please. And he said, I can't take you on. And I said, well, why not? He said, because you're too old. And I remember thinking at 14.
I was going to say an old man at 14.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to jump forward a second, because I tracked down my old trombone teacher a few months ago.
Yeah, we just talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him for 36 years.
Wow.
And I wanted to speak to him to thank him for taking me on. But I only just discovered recently the actual what happened there, because it wasn't that he didn't want to take me on himself. It was because the school, the rules of the school curriculum, whatever it was, were, if a child at 14, because if they're going to leave school at 16, there's not enough time for the child to really get to grips with the musical instrument.
Right. That's true, I guess. But
isn't enough.
Yeah.
So they told all these visiting peripatetic teachers, don't take on any pupils older than 12 or 13, because there's just simply not enough time.
Interesting.
It's going to waste everyone's time,
Right.
Now, for whatever reason, he must have seen something within me that was different.
Yeah, I mean, you had a desire. I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Exactly that. And so he said to me, he said, look, and again, I didn't find out until recently, against his better judgment, but he thought, he was going on the school rules. So he sort of said, look, here's a trombone. I'm going to let you borrow the school and take it away for 2 weeks. This is how you play it. Come back and we'll see. And those 2 weeks, I went crazy. I just practiced. Yeah. I just didn't stop it. But not more importantly, I fell in love with it. And I came back after 2 weeks and he went, oh, okay. And I became his pupil. And then within like a few months, I'd taken my first exam on it. And I'm passing exams.
Yeah.
Where I used to fail everything else. And I'm thinking, wow, this is great. This is good. So yeah, and it was, so when I spoke to him recently, I had to thank him so much, because I didn't realize how much he put his neck on the line for me.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Making it happen. But anyway, so I was playing trombone, and that's how I learned to read music. So I wasn't studying music as an academic subject, so I learned everything from the trombone.
Yeah.
And then I was feeling very good about myself, and then the school band, we decided to form our own little group, as you do at school, outside of wind band.
Right.
And when we had all these other instruments and no bass player, so someone says, well, who's going to do it? And that's often the way with bands.
I know, yeah.
Nobody wants to play bass.
I've actually got a pretty funny story about how I become a bass player. I'll tell you later.
Oh, okay. So I sort of said, well, look, because I've played guitars at home with my brothers,
Right.
It's not a bass, but it's still
it's in the family.
So I volunteered. Yeah, so my eldest brother took me out and we bought my first bass guitar, which was a K Fender Precision copy.
Mm-hmm.
And if ever there was anything could be used as a boat anchor, it was this K bass copy. Honestly, it was just the heaviest imaginable. But because I could already read music,
right,
straight away, all I had to do was learn where the notes were. Mm-hmm. So straight away, I was able to play in this group. And then my trombone teacher could see this. Now, my trombone teacher was also a fixer in that area. In other words, he was booking musicians,
right, like a contractor.
Exactly. So he could see this, and he's thinking, do you know what? Dave could do well as a pro trombonist, but more people need bass players than trombone players.
Yep. That's
So
true.
he said to me, yeah, one of the best pieces of advice ever. He sort of said, listen, if you take up acoustic double bass as well as bass guitar, you'll get even more work.
Yeah, that's such great advice.
Yeah, and so I was like 15 when this was going on, still at school. So the school didn't have one or a bass guitar. They didn't have any of those instruments, so I had to buy my own. And so at that time, while I was still at school, I was playing trombone, bass guitar, and double bass. And then as soon as I left school, I didn't turn pro immediately. I was doing gigs, but I worked in a music shop for a while. But then my trombone teacher started to give me work. Well,
awesome.
He didn't want to give me work as a trombonist because he wanted the trombone work.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So he was booking me as a bass player. So that was it. When I got to 17, I turned pro. I'm thinking to myself, there's enough work for me to carry on doing this. So yeah, from 17 onwards, I was a professional musician.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, like to get, the thing is, you're so fortunate to have guys like that guiding you and giving you great advice, right?
Oh yeah. Well, that's the reason why, to be honest, with all due respect, it was such a long time ago. And when you're a kid, and any teacher that you have always seems to be way older to you than they are.
Right. Exactly. They seem like they're 60 and they're actually like 35 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So when I discovered he was still with us, I thought it was wonderful, and it was so important for me to be able to speak to him on the phone, to give him my gratitude. And you know what? We've just discovered this other bizarre coincidence. His wife, who I thought I had no connection with, her father, who sadly just passed away a few days ago, her father used to sing in the choir that I was in, the church choir.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I actually sang with the father of my trombone player's future wife.
It's all very complicated.
Yeah, no, but it's just weird how, because I said the two people really that had the biggest impact on me, my musicality, apart from my brothers who introduced the instruments.
Sure.
But one was the choir master, which is a guy called Stan Morris. He was the choir master and the organist at our church. And the other one was my trombone teacher, Philip Johnson. And it's so weird because I thought these were very separate people.
Right, yeah.
But only in the last few days, I discovered, like I said, that my trombone teacher's wife, her dad was connected with my choir. So all of a sudden there's this...
Yeah, sort of synchronicity, right?
Yeah, it's so weird that these two key people are now connected,
So how did you end up getting to London and that whole process? I mean, obviously you were gigging, you were already kind of busy. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, mostly I was working in the area that I came from. So I was doing a lot of theatre work, pit work, sessions, TV things. And I did some cruise ships.
Oh, okay.
Which were great fun. I did 4 cruise ships in the mid-'80s.
Awesome.
So that was great for me to travel, see the world, meet lots of new people.
Yeah, and now that you're connecting with people and you're getting a chance to do what you love, that's an awesome thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it was the first time in America. I'd never been to America before, and in New York in particular. So I bought my first fake book there. Yeah. I bought loads of recordings that you couldn't get back home. So that was a fantastic time, a lot of fun. But I knew that the music I was playing on the cruise ships it wasn't that fulfilling. You were playing for dancers or... Yeah,
it's sort of the musician's day job in a way. Yeah, which is fine, but...
Absolutely, but I'd go back to my cabin and I'd be listening to Weather Report, Return to Forever, Al Di Meola. And I'm thinking, I love this creative improvisational music. So when I got to a point, it was in the late 80s, I think it was 88, and I discovered, I need to be playing more creative music with creative musicians. And the first thing I did was, and I wanted to study as well, because as I said, all of my knowledge came from playing the trombone.
Right. Yeah. It was the bass end of it was a lot of just being self-taught, but it worked, obviously. Right.
Yeah, and just you're just out there doing gigs, but there was lots I didn't know about sort of harmony, improvisation, all this kind of stuff. Yep. So I sort of wrote away to Berkeley because I heard that was the place to go. This was in '88, and I got the prospectus, and the cost of going to Berkeley back then was it was off the scale. I thought that's not going to happen. Right. So I thought the next best thing is to get to London.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, and I'll study privately with some people, and also perhaps the people I end up studying with will help me get work as well. Right. So that's what I did. At the end of 1988, I moved to London. A friend of mine, I didn't know that many people. I knew 2 people, I think. And he was actually giving lessons himself. He'd formed this little kind of music school, very small, low-key thing. And he ended up saying, well, will you teach there? And I said, well, I've come to London to study.
But you're already a very experienced player by then, right?
Well, yeah. So at this stage, I'd had like 8 years experience as a professional player. So I said, oh, okay, I'll do this. But then I made sure I checked out the people that were teaching. Right. And there were several people that went to Berkeley. So I started to study privately with them. Awesome. And I was shocked at how little I knew about harmony, chord structures, because I could read everything I was doing up until that point was written down. Most of the bass parts I was given were actually notated. I wasn't doing a lot of stuff that was
like improvise or just chord charts or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a shock to me when I started to study how little I knew about this stuff. But I'm just thinking to myself, I'm in London, I'm in the right place, very, very fertile place. I'm going to gigs, I'm going to Ronnie Scott's, I'm watching jazz musicians, I'm buying jazz records, I'm studying with jazz players. So I thought to myself, this is it for me. This is where I want to be and what I want to be doing.
You know what's great about that, Dave, is that you were open enough to say, hey, I don't know everything I need to know. Because a lot of guys, when they've been playing for a number of years, they get really, I don't want to admit that I don't know certain things, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because there was, at that time, there was a real stigma attached. If you were an established player, or if you were a pro player, that you were studying with someone, because it almost looked like a chink in your armor. It was almost like as though you weren't who you were supposed to be, and I just thought, well, I really didn't care about that. I just thought it's important for me to study the accumulation of knowledge. And because and a lot of my motivation actually, and even now I study like crazy, I'm always studying music. And I think a lot of it is because I did badly at school, with my academic subjects.
Sure.
Everything was C's, D's, and E's.
It happens.
I only ever got an A in phys ed and playing the trombone. So, and it's really funny. I think a lot of it is to do with finding something that you're passionate about. And I was very passionate about music. And I think once you find something that you are passionate about, then you're going to give it everything.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, sometimes it just takes a while to find that, right? You don't. Absolutely. Some people know it really early. Some people, it takes time to develop it and figure out what you really like and what you're drawn to. Yeah.
Hey, well, listen, I got married for the first time last year, and I'm 56.
So, wow, and you did really well in that.
I became a dad 3.5 years ago for the first time. So sometimes, I was always a late bloomer.
As long as you get there, that's the important part. So, the cool thing about London, of course, is there's such a vibrant music scene. I mean, it's basically similar to New York, that kind of energy. And that's one of the things I actually really like about London. Tell me about the Jools Holland thing, how that came about. Yeah. I know you were doing a bunch of other stuff before that, obviously, with television stuff and soundtracks and that kind of thing.
Well, I wasn't actually appearing on TV, but I was playing on soundtracks. Actually, I did appear in one film. When I first moved to London, there was a British playwright, a very famous one called Dennis Potter.
Oh, okay.
He did a lot of films and TV series, and he was doing a film at the time with an actor called Alan Bates, and it was called Secret Friends. And they wanted some musicians to play on the soundtrack, but they wanted us to be in the movie as well.
Oh, well, there you go. That's good.
So that was kind of fun. It was a long time ago. I had hair and a ponytail, so it shows you how long ago.
I did too. That was also a long time ago.
Yeah. But yeah, do you know what? The thing for me is when I moved to London, and I was paying for private lessons. But again, I wasn't studying the instrument because I knew how to play, but I was studying harmony, advanced harmony, all that kind of stuff. So, and I was doing jazz gigs. So all of a sudden, my income, you know, from what I was doing in the previous 8 or 9 years, earning great money, all of a sudden it just went.
Unfortunately, it's hard. It always has been hard to make money playing jazz, which is sad. But it's you know, and then whatever money I'm earning, I'm spending it on studying jazz with But anyway, and I actually studied with a fantastic American jazz double bass player called Michael Moore. Not to be mixed up with the TV. But yeah, I think Michael Moore is still with us. I certainly hope he is. His last gig was playing with Dave Brubeck. Wow. Yeah, that's no joke. Yeah, he's an amazing player. So awesome. he lived in London for a while. So he helped a lot, and he encouraged me to spend some time at the piano because he played piano himself. And he just said that's really important for bass players, you know, for the harmonic knowledge. Yeah, it really opens up your perception of things, right? Yeah. But I was really skint. You know, I was not earning a lot of money at all. And then so I was doing jazz gigs, and one of the guys I was playing with was a saxophone player, a guy called Phil Veacock, and we would get together with some friends and we would do gigs, but then we'd get together in one of our homes and we'd just play jazz records all day. You know, we were all just such keen to be jazz musicians that we just put on these albums all day and listen, and I'd go home and I'd transcribe stuff. That's awesome. It's fun to have like a crew that you're hanging with that's in the same space, right? Absolutely, yeah. We had this little jazz gang, you know. But what happened is that Phil was already doing some gigs with Jools Holland. Now, I knew Jools Holland from being the piano player, the keyboard player in Squeeze. Right, which was a huge band. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So, and as a kid, I used to buy Squeeze records. Oh, fun. I used to go buy the singles. And also, Jools was, he co-presented a TV show in the 80s with Paula Yates, who was married to Bob Geldof. Right. And it was called The Tube. And it was like, I guess it was like a precursor to later with Jools Holland. It was a live music show. And I learned a lot how to play the bass from watching that TV show because there were so many bands on. Yeah, and Jools is a great, what I really like about him and that show and the later show is that he's a great player, and I know he has a big love for like American music, for R&B, soul, and he's great at it too, as you guys all are. Oh, thank you. And he's very knowledgeable. You know, he really knows the background of all of that stuff, which is quite unusual. It adds a different level than just having a performance show. Exactly. Now, when Phil said he was working with him, because I hadn't heard of Jools for years. He'd gone off the radar. He hadn't been on TV, and I said, "Well, what's happening with him?" And he said, "Well, you know, we went back and forth with Squeeze. He kept joining and leaving them, whatever. And this time, you know, Jools had left Squeeze for good. That was it. He wanted to go solo and do his own thing, and he didn't want to play pop music or rock music anymore. He wanted to play blues, R&B, that kind of stuff that he really had a passion for. Yeah, exactly. So he'd already got together a bunch of musicians. He'd gone out in Southeast London to a pub, and I think he'd seen a rehearsal big band playing in this pub, and he cherry picked a couple of guys. So at that time, he couldn't afford to hire a full big band. Right. But he cherry picked like a tenor player, you know, a trumpet player, trombone player. So it was almost him kind of quietly doing an audition. Yeah, exactly that. Which is a good lesson for musicians, because you never know that could be the one guy sitting in the audience, right? Well, you know, briefly going back to Dave Holland, you know, the guy, the famous jazz player from my hometown of Wolverhampton. That's a great story with him. Yep. I mean, he was doing a gig in Ronnie Scott's, and Miles Davis walks in, is at the back of the room, likes what he hears. Yeah.
And then he gets the Miles Davis gig, I mean, is the shortened version of it, But,
right, yeah.
You never know who's there. So anyway, what happened is that Jools had been using the fabulous Pino Palladino on bass, which I know everyone's heard of.
Yep, no slouch.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, when Pino moved from Wales to London, I believe his very first gig was with Jools Holland.
Oh, okay.
I think Jools had a band called Jools Holland and his Millionaires. And Pino was the bass player in that. Now, so see, Pino had been doing some gigs, and it was a small band. It was like a 5-piece rhythm section and 4 horns. But they'd just been doing like really small, low-key gigs, nothing at all. So at this point, Jools didn't have the TV, the radio show, anything like that.
Right. He's just sort of putting his whole thing togetbe the beginnings of it, right?
Very early stages. But then, of course, Pino was getting more and more noticed by people. And so he'd be doing stuff with Jools, and then Gary Newman wanted him, and then Paul Young, blah, blah, blah. And he got to the point where he knew that was his way. That's what he had to do. He had to go out and play with all these people.
Sure.
So this left Jools without a bassist. Now, he then started to, because so Squeeze at the time, Jools' old band, were on a break, so to speak. So Jools was using the bass player Keith Wilkinson from Squeeze, and he was using Gilson Lavis, the drummer from Squeeze.
Oh, okay.
So that was the Jools Holland band. And then what happened? Squeeze reformed again.
I know and I've heard. I mean, I remember there was a I think it was VH1 Behind the Music with Jools, and there was a while he kind of went into that whole history of that. But that Squeeze was a great band. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was with them I did one gig with them. I was an honorary member of Squeeze for one night, years and years ago.
Very nice.
But I love their music. But anyway, what happened is Squeeze got back together again. Now the drummer and the bass player had to make a choice. Do we stick with Jools on this brand new fledgling solo career, or do we go back with a band that we've always known,
right?
That we know what's going on?
He can work, and it's going to get booked, and
So they chose to go with Squeeze. So this opened up the bass and drum chair with Jools Holland, and that's where I came in. So this sax player that I've been doing jazz gigs with said, Jools needs a bass player. I thought I'd put your name forward, and especially because he wanted someone who played upright bass.
Double bass and electric.
Yeah. He'd only used bass guitarists, and he was really keen now to have a double bass player. So I said, yeah, sure, but I was very carefree about it, because Jools Holland back then, this was 1991, wasn't the Jools Holland that we know now.
Yeah, he was sort of a guy from a pop band and kind of figuring out what he wants to do. And
yeah, exactly that. So I went along to his studio, which is 5 minutes from where I live here in South London. And there was Jools and the guitarist, and we just played. I got my double bass out. We played for an hour, just busting, jamming, whatever. And then, and again, I was very casual, very just, whatever, let's, I mean, I was still doing a good job, but I wasn't like,
you weren't like I'm auditioning for a huge star kind of.
Yeah, exactly that. So I mean, for instance, if you were auditioning for Jools Holland now, it'd be a very different thing.
Right, it's a lot more pressure.
Yeah. And there's a lot more going on, and if you audition now, you'd realize that what you're stepping into. Whereas back then it was like, whatever. Yeah. So at the end of me playing, Jools said, "Oh, it's really great. We love your playing, but we do have other people to see." And I remember thinking at the time, that sounds like someone kind of going like,
yeah, like, oh, blimey, whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm putting the bass away really casually, and him and the guitarist go outside, and they come back after a few minutes, and Jools went, "Oh, look, just the gig's yours,
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I think the thing is, somebody like that, who's that experienced, like, they know, like, they hear somebody, or like, when he said we went to the club and he's looking for guys, and like, he knows what's up.
Exactly. I mean, I'm still not sure exactly what the conversation was that they had outside.
There was probably, he's really tall.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and actually what's kind of funny about that too is, of course, Pino is a very tall guy.
Oh yeah, Pino is actually a little taller than I am. So yeah, it's a good job that Jools wasn't heightist.
Exactly.
About it.
He had no height issues.
Yes. So
That's
that was
funny.
it. And Jules gave me a carrier bag full of cassette tapes of gigs and rehearsals and whatever. And he just said, yeah, just learn all this stuff, you know. And again, I remember thinking, okay, you know, that's cool. But it wasn't like, oh my God, because again, he wasn't who he is now. And then that was 91. And then we just were doing very low key gigs. So we were doing like college gigs, summer balls, you know, small clubs, very, very low key and stuff. And then the following year, 92, I don't know how it came about, but the BBC contacted Jools and said, listen, we want to do a late night live music TV show. We want you to host it.
Wow.
So, you know, so that was the first thing. And all of a sudden we're getting called up to play on TV with, you know, Vince Gill, John Prine, Mary Chapin Carpenter, George Benson. I'm kind of going...
You know, the thing about that is because in the States, of course, well, even back then, there wasn't really that many TV channels. But in London or in England, the BBC kind of rules, especially then, right? It was like the BBC channels, everybody was watching the BBC on a Saturday night, I would think, at that point.
Well, prior to that, we had the Old Grey Whistle tests.
Sure.
You know, we had Top of the Pops as well, but we had the Old Grey Whistle test.
Which are both great shows, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and obviously it was very different in the fact that it was just Bob Harris chatting to the audience and then be a band. There wouldn't be any audience. Sorry, chatting to the... he's speaking to the camera and then there's just the band. So there's no audience.
Yeah, right. A different setup. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a different thing. So, but it was such a weird thing, getting a phone call saying, we need you to come in to play for George Benson, and we need you to... And the irony was that when I'd been a freelance musician, or say on the cruise ships, I've been playing the music of George Benson, of Shaka Khan, Al Jarreau.
You're playing the hits and then all the fun stuff, right?
Yeah, but now I'm playing for them.
Yeah, it's funny because I had that experience. I grew up in LA watching, you know, Frankie Avalon movies and all the beach movies, and then all of a sudden one day I'm on stage with them and I'm like, how did this happen? It was kind of a weird thing. Yeah. But
I still love. Well, I mean, I love the film Grease, you know, and the Beauty School Dropout.
Yep. All that stuff, and it's, you know, that, I mean, that era is just, it's great music. Yeah. It's just fun music. And it's, with Jools, the TV show. I mean, I started watching that when I lived in Tokyo with Cirque. I guess I don't know now, like 12 years ago, whatever. But I was like, man, what a great show. I mean, what I like about it is everything's live. There's no lip syncing. There's none of that I've ever noticed. And obviously you guys are great. You guys get a chance to back up a long, huge list of stars. Who's some of the favorites that I know we've talked about that a little bit, but who are some of the ones that come to mind when you think of like, that was a great moment? Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a lot to do with who I grew up listening to and who I loved listening to when I was a kid. So, you know, I was definitely, when I was a trombone player, because I was playing in all different kind of bands, like I was playing in orchestras, brass bands, wind bands, but I was playing in funk bands and jazz orchestras and stuff. So I was playing a lot of stuff, but, you know, one band I played in, we used to do a lot of like Earth, Wind and Fire type stuff. So Black American funk music.
That's for a bass player. It's like the gold.
Yeah, exactly that. But yeah, so for me as a trombonist as well as a bass player.
Right, sure.
So anyway, so one of my favorites was always Shaka Khan, you know, and not only did I love her voice, but because I'm a huge Anthony Jackson fan who played bass on a lot of those.
Legendary bass player.
Yeah. So, you know, I had all of her albums. So all of a sudden in the mid-90s when we got called to play with her on TV, in fact, it's strange because the two songs that we did with her, Anthony wasn't on them. So one was Ain't Nobody, and the other one was I'm Every Woman.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I think I'm Every Woman is Will
who
Lee.
Who doesn't love to play those two on bass?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I got to play with it, and I remember thinking, you know, it really doesn't get any better than this. You know, this is someone who I've had all her albums, listened to her my adult life, and here I am on a TV show playing these classic things with her. So definitely her. George Benson is another one we did on Broadway with him on Jules' show.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And he was such a lovely guy as well. He was such a sweet man. So that was very special. Al Jarreau is another big favorite of mine. When I was working on the cruise ships in the 80s, I would just put on Al Jarreau cassette tapes every day, all day, because it was such uplifting music. But
he's I mean, with him, I mean, he's just it was like a musical force. But way beyond just being a singer.
And he was just so versatile as well. You know, he could do so much stuff. And he did the radio show first. He did Jools' BBC radio show, which the radio show came after the TV show.
What's the actual name of that show?
Do you know what? I'm not sure if
it's probably morphed a little bit over the years, but
yeah, I think it just might be called Jools Holland's Radio 2 show.
Is it on which BBC channel is that on?
So it's a BBC radio show. It's on Radio 2.
Okay, cool.
You know,
I know there everybody knows, but just so
it's probably just called the Jools Holland Show or something like that. It's not like where the TV thing is specifically later.
Right. It's sort of a different animal, a little different entity.
So playing with Al was super special because again, these were my heroes from when I was 19, 20, 21. Now, if someone would have said to me when I was working on those cruise ships, listening to Shaka, George, and Al Jarreau, if someone would have said, like, in 10 years' time, you're going to be playing with all of these and so many more, you know, you'd have gone, what are you talking about?
What's great about that is that, you know, that's the one thing that's so great about music is you just never know. And I mean, and if you're a good player and you work hard, people will notice you and they recommend you and all that kind of thing. And I know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, forgive me for interrupting, but there's a great saying that I always like to quote a lot, and it's the harder you work, the luckier you get.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Tell me about, I know some of the other people I actually have, it's a very long list of folks you guys have backed up, and not only backed up, but obviously that have been on the show, but Paul McCartney is one that really stuck out. And there's a great photo of him singing and you're in the background. And it's like, oh my God, that's, you know.
That was fun. Well, I'd already met George Harrison and Ringo. So I'd already worked with those guys. And in fact, with George Harrison, he'd invited Jools and the band to his 50th birthday party.
Oh, awesome.
In the early 90s. And we went to a place called Portmeirion in Wales because Jools was interviewing the remaining Beatles for the Beatles anthology. And it was George's turn to be interviewed by Jools. And George said, well, listen, why don't you come down? We'll do the interview here. Stay the weekend and bring the band with you. This is when it was a 9-piece, you know. So we got to spend the weekend with George Harrison on his 50th birthday party.
Oh,
I'm
amazing.
hoping there's some pictures. I'm hoping there's some photographs from that. But and also George Harrison appeared on one of our albums, and it was his last ever recording. It's on our first Jools Holland and Friends album. I think it's called Small World, Big Band. And the song's called Horse to the Water. And George wrote it for us. We actually got a demo cassette tape of George strumming on his guitar.
Oh, amazing.
And as far as I know, it was the last ever recording of George Harrison. So very, very poignant. So, and I worked with Ringo. That's fun. But then Paul McCartney came on George's radio show first. And whatever song we did, he was playing mandolin. So he definitely wanted me to play bass on the radio. But then he came and did that TV show. And he did 2 songs. One was a duet with Kylie Minogue, where Getty was playing mandolin. But then he wanted to do Got to Get You Into My Life. And in the rehearsal, he picked up a bass guitar. So I was playing upright at the time. And I just thought, well, I'll sit this one out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, I'll just watch, which is great too, right?
Playing bass here. What am I doing? You know.
Sure.
And he saw me putting the bass. He said, "No, Dave." He said, "I want you to play. You know, I want to play." And he said, and apart from anything else, he said, "There's a bit in the song, but I always forget where it changes." And he said, I need you to help cue me where that bit of the song is. And I remember like chuckling to myself, thinking, "Hang on, this is Paul McCartney."
I'm going to give Paul McCartney a cue.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they wrote this song, and he's asking me for a cue, you know. And I said, "Yeah, that's great, you know." And obviously, the upright and the electric, there's a slightly different vibe, you know. So we did the recording, and sure enough, and it's on YouTube. If you watch the recording, it's towards the end of the song. At one point, Paul turns round and look at me, and I think I either raise my eyebrows or I nod or I do something.
You're like,
but Yeah, it's me giving Paul McCartney a cue on his
so
own.
Funny, yeah.
Yeah, he was. It's and obviously there's a lot going on there. There's the cameras, and it was all done in it was very good natured, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, it was a great honor doing that, and actually one of the more recent ones, which was very special, was playing with Paul Simon.
Oh yeah.
Now I knew of him originally because both my brothers had Simon and Garfunkel albums.
Sure.
But my middle brother had a fantastic Paul Simon solo album, and I think it was called There Goes Rhyming Simon.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. I think it's There Goes Rhyming Simon, yeah. And it's every song on there is an absolute gem. It's got some and me, I used to sing along to that album when I was a kid because the songs are so catchy. So it's a brilliant record. So when we heard he was coming on the TV show, I was thinking, wow, that's so cool, Paul Simon, and obviously I was familiar with his more recent career.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's great. And then when we got sent the track, it was off his new album, and the track was called Wristband.
Oh, okay.
And I'm listening to it, I'm thinking to myself, this is like a bass feature.
Oh, cool.
The song, it's on upright, and it's mostly like a voice and bass feature. There's hardly anything else in there.
Wow.
Now, normally on Jools' show, the stuff I get to play, it's not very flamboyant.
Yeah.
It's not very technically demanding because you're playing popular music.
Right, a lot of pop stuff and. Sure.
Yeah, we're not playing high-octane jazz fusion or anything like that,
Although he does have that on his show sometimes.
Well, no, but the thing is, this bass line, it wasn't technically difficult, but it just surprised me, the fact it was so bass featured. I'd never had this before. So I went to the BBC for the day of the rehearsal. The day of the broadcast, we rehearsed with the artist only like 2 hours before we record it.
Oh, interesting.
It's very, very last.
What's the sort of schedule for you guys? So you do like a couple hour rehearsal, then you do the show taping. That's all within like a 6 hour thing, or?
Yeah. So we usually sort of get the track the night before, and we just get either a CD in the post, or they send it, as a link, an email link.
Sure.
Kind of thing. And we have to learn the song ourselves. So we very rarely get presented with charts.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I mean, we had Andy Williams on the show once.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled about that because I used to watch the Andy Williams show when I was a kid. So he was quite a hero, but his MD unusually had charts. Now, here's the other thing. There's only myself and the horn players in Jools' band that read written notation.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
The rest of the rhythm section don't read. So
sure.
A lot of the time, if an artist has like some charts, it's not of a great deal of use other than to me and any of the horn players. So what we tend to do now is we just, as a great leveler for the whole thing, we just all learn it from, direct from the track kind of thing. Yeah. But the first thing that I always do, and I always have done, is I do a transcription of every bass line that I've ever had to play. So
yeah, because you want to make sure you're accurate, and especially for really well-known.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to not being a very good student at school. And so now when I do this, I want to be the best.
Yeah.
It's almost like if I could go back in time to sit in the classroom as opposed to be the kid at the back that says, don't pick me. I'd be the kid sitting at the front with my arm up, kind of going, ask me, please, miss, ask me.
But Dave, that's exactly why you've been so successful, is because of that, because you've sought out the knowledge and you've forced yourself out of the safety zone, right? And that's such a good lesson, I think.
Well, Jools always calls me doesn't always call me, but he has called me the detail guy, because the thing is, I'm very meticulous with my transcriptions, and I've got every bass line I've ever played for any artist in these folders in my attic. I've got thousands of them.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I write the date and when it was, who the artist was.
Yeah, and they're great. They're also, besides just being charts, they're great memories, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And also, when you end up playing with these guys again further down the line, as opposed to learning it all from scratch, I just whip the chart out and whatever,
Sure.
Now, if there's time, I'll always make an effort to learn the part off by heart. I don't always want to have a piece of paper stuck in front of me, but sometimes, depends on the complexity of the part and the amount of time we have.
Right.
Sometimes I will have the chart with me on the TV show.
So when you did I'm going to get back to Paul Simon because I kind of got knocked you off track. But so when you did the Paul Simon thing, were you nervous with that, or I mean, obviously he was a sort of a hero for you musically.
Well, do you know what there was definitely a different kind of pressure for me on that, because normally when I do the TV show, by default I get stuck at the back. Yeah, because being the tallest one and playing double bass, you know.
But you know, the good thing is you're always right behind Jools, so everybody always sees you on camera.
That's true. But the producer, you know, because there's always like a nice backdrop on the TV show, and our producer Janet, she always comes along, and she, you know, it's an in joke really. She looks at me and she looks at me spoiling the backdrop, you know, sticking out so high above it. And she's kind of going, oh, no, can we get him to sit down, lie down?
Can you just kneel down a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Funny.
But anyway, with this one, when I turned up and by default, I went to stand at the back. And she went, no, you've got to stand at the front.
Oh, okay.
Because it's such a big, prominent bass part. So they put me right next to Paul Simon.
Oh, amazing.
We're standing right next to each other. And this for me was like, so, I mean, I guess there was a little bit of, it was a different feeling. I was probably a bit more nervous than, well, not nervous, but I was just very aware there was more at stake here.
Sure, yeah. You're front and center.
Because yeah, the camera is going to be on me all the time. You know, there's going to be no hiding in the background. But do you know what? It was great fun. And we ran through the track, and in between rehearsal, because you have to like rehearse the song with the artist, and then you have to do it again for the lighting people, then you have to do it for the sound guys, you know. So it's not, when we do multiple run-throughs, it's not just for, I mean, it always benefits us the more times we do it. Yeah. But it's as much to do with whoever else is there. But in between each run-through, because we and I were next to each other, we got to chat a lot.
Oh, amazing.
Which wouldn't normally happen because I would normally be at the back, you know.
Right.
And he was asking about my bass because his father was a double bass player. He still has his father's bass in his office.
Interesting.
He was fascinated with my instrument, and he was saying, you know, how old is it? Where was it made? He wanted to know all about it. And then we were talking about touring. He was telling me about how how tough it is now, you know. And I said, listen, I think I was 55, 54 at the time. And I said, it's tough for me as well. You know, it's kind of, it doesn't get any easier the older you get.
Yeah. And I was actually going to say, so in Jools, besides doing the TV show, he actually tours quite a bit, right? I mean, not only in the UK, but he goes kind of everywhere.
I mean, we've done a couple of world tours in the past, and we do a lot of stuff in Europe. But yeah, we always do 2 big tours in the UK. We do like a 3-month tour in the summer and a 3-month one in the winter. And then in between that is the TV and the radio shows. And we would do some private gigs as well. But obviously that's changed a lot. But yeah, that was, yeah, well, the one thing I must finish with the Paul Simon thing is every time we did the song, he did it differently. He would move bars, he would take bars out, and he would add bars in.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know, and because I'm trying to do this particular riff, it's quite a set thing, and he's shifting the bars, and I'm just
you're just like, hey, Paul, you're messing up the song.
No, yeah, I literally had to, because a lot of the time it's like a 2-bar phrase.
Sure.
And I had to kind of.
You have to figure out how to land back on one.
Yeah. And, you know, you had to repeat certain bars or completely miss them out. But he literally every single time was different.
How funny!
And I'm thinking, wow, you know, this is, you know, you really have to have your wits about you, because like, a lot of the time you play this stuff and they want exactly what's on the record.
Yeah, exactly.
And they do what's on the record. But this, you know, he was busking. He was busking. You know. So,
well, you know what's actually great about that is he obviously felt comfortable with you that he could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think, and you've just got to do it, man. You know, you've got to have good ears. That's the thing with this industry. Now, ironically, when I started out as a musician, my strength was my reading skills.
Right.
You know, that's what got me a ton of work to begin with. Because at the time, particularly with bass players, there weren't many that could read. And with trombone, I used to have to read 4 clefs. You know, bass, tenor, alto, and treble clef. Yeah. there was nothing that I couldn't read on bass that I could.
Yeah, I used to use trombone books to practice reading, trombone and cello, both, just for the ear, right? Doing some classical stuff. It's fun to kind of knock yourself out of the pop stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and especially early on, there was a lot more trombone books available than there were bass books. I mean, all I had was a couple of Carol Kay books to begin with.
Yeah, and this is way before YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. But what with me, I realized as I got older, if I want to be successful and to get more work, you need to work on these things. They're as important. So when Paul was doing this and he was changing the bars around, I just had to do this. I had to move with it every time.
I always say it's a little bit like surfing, right? You have to like kind of catch the groove and figure out.
And I was surprised because I just thought it was going to be as the record, and that's what I'd transcribed, and that's what I've got in my head. But it just shows you the goalposts are always moving. So, but he was lovely, and it was a great thing, and a lot of people saw that, and it was the first time a lot of people became aware of my bass playing because they'd seen a lot of other videos, and sometimes you can't hear the bass that well, or sometimes the bass part isn't that prominent. But with that one, because it's so out front and high in the mix, and it's basically just voice and bass, a lot of people contacted me and said, "Oh, we saw that, we loved your playing." So it kind of put me on the map a little bit more.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, those are my favorite ones. I mean, we played with Smokey Robinson as well, which was very cool. And that day with Smokey, our guitarist couldn't make it, so we had to get a depth guitarist, and Jools got Eric Clapton.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, well, Jools called me up and he said, "Listen, our guitarist can't do it. Can you recommend anybody?" And I'm kind of saying, "Well, I can, but I know how fussy Jools is, and if I pick the wrong guy,
yeah, you're never gonna hear the end of it."
And I just said, I'd be happier if you made the decision. So he came back to me. He said, "Look," he said, "I've called everyone." He said, "I'm really scraping the barrel." He said, I managed to get Eric Clapton. I hope that's okay." Yeah, I think he'll do. And what was bizarre about that day is I'm sitting with Eric because he wanted to sit down. Normally we all stand up on that, and so we're sitting next to each other. And it was a bit like the day with Paul Simon. I got to chat with Eric a lot more. I'd worked with him quite a few times, but this day we got to chat a lot more together. And then we were told that Smokey Robinson was not going to be rehearsing with us because he tried to got in late.
Sure.
And he wanted to rest. So they said the first time you're going to see him is when he walks on to the TV floor.
Yeah, he's such a pro, though.
Oh, yeah. but Eric looked to me and he went, "Are they kidding?" And I said, "Welcome to my
You just freaked out Eric Clapton. That's not easy to do."
Yeah. Well, the thing with Eric, I mean, and he plays beautifully. He does a great solo in that, and he's a wonderful guy and a good friend. But I suppose from his point of view, where he's used to rehearsing for days, weeks, months for anything he does, and all of a sudden there is no rehearsal for this. We are going to be playing with.
And you're going to be on national TV.
And national TV, yeah. And I just said, "Welcome to my world. This is what it's like." So that's right. We ran through the song, and it was, when Norah Jones had a hit with it. It was called "Don't Know Why."
Yeah, it's a great song.
I can't remember who wrote it, but she had the big hit with it, and that's what Smokey wanted to do. So yeah, it's not on YouTube. I think they took it down. I think there was a copyright issue with it, but it's funny because you can see me sitting next to Eric, and Eric's doing this solo, and I'm looking at him, and I've just got this grin that extends up here, because I'm sitting there playing bass with Eric and Smokey Robinson. And again, you have those moments.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of pinch me moments, right?
Yeah, how did this happen? From being back at school and being given a euphonium and saying, "This isn't for me," how do I end up here? How is this happening? And it's wonderful.
Well, that's the magic of music, right? It brings bringing people together that you would never normally think would actually mix together. Eric Clapton and Smokey Robinson. But of course, Eric's a soulful guy. I mean, he's a soulful player, and I'm sure he grew up listening to that music too, right? So I'm sure he loves it.
And it's obviously as well, a lot of it is to do with, because you can say to people, and you should always work hard at your craft. I mean, that's the most important thing. I mean, even now, I get the most satisfaction from practicing, hearing improvement in my own playing, studying, transcribing, all that stuff, But there is an element of timing, luck, serendipity with this industry.
Yeah, there's definitely, but like you said, hard work sort of helps the luck, right? Sort of helps it happen.
But yeah, so yeah, the harder you work, the luckier you get, because you know, you have to be out there, you have to be seen to be doing stuff, you have to be, you know, people need to know who you are and what you're doing. But the thing for me is I sometimes get younger players and they come to me and they see what I've achieved in my career and they say, how do you get endorsements? How do you get on the front cover of a magazine? How do you get interviews and stuff? And I'm thinking, you're asking all the wrong questions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I didn't ask for any of those things.
Yeah.
You know, when I was on TV with Jools for 4 years before I got a single endorsement. I was on TV playing with Shaka and all these people.
Sure.
And I was playing like an old Fender Jazz. I was buying my own strings. I was buying my own picks, amps, everything. And they were flicking the channels one night, and we were on this TV show with Shaka. Then we were on later with Jools. We'd done another TV show like on a separate channel, and this my friend was saying, I can't get rid of you.
You're everywhere.
you're there playing bass, you know. And I said, that's amazing. I'm so sorry. I said, I can't apologize enough. But he said to me at the time, this was the mid-90s, he said, you must have endorsements coming out your ears. And I said to him, what's an endorsement?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know, and I've been on TV for 5 years because it wasn't a priority. What the priority was this.
Yeah, you're doing the work, right? Yeah, you're not really focused on, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, because I mean, we've talked a lot about the endorsement thing, and you have some great companies that you're working with now. Ibanez is one of them that's been awesome with you, and we're both Ibanez fans. I had one back in the 80s that I loved. But the thing about that is, like, yeah, you have to do the work first, and you got to put in the time. And if you do that, those companies will notice you. I mean, of course, it's good to reach out to them, but that's you know, and that's gotten even more challenging, I think, within recent years. But
yeah, well, it was great with Ibanez, because what happened is I started to collect basses, which I never intended to do that. But
yeah, you have a huge bass collection. I should mention.
I mean, I to be honest, I still don't know how many I have, but it's probably around about 100 or something like that. But yeah, in the about 6-7 years ago, a friend of mine sold me a fretless Ibanez musician, like from the early 80s, and I didn't really have any Ibanez instruments. They'd gone under the radar for me. So, and I got it, and I just thought, this is so beautiful. But then I played it, and I thought, this is one of the best instruments I've ever played. So I started to collect vintage Ibanez basses, and then it got a little out of hand. You know, I must have like 50 of them at least, I guess, 50 or 60.
Yeah, it's funny because you post those photos. I'm like, oh my God, I want that. especially the newer instruments that they're making are just stunning, like amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird how it happened, because the last time I did an interview for Bass Guitar magazine, they put me and Jools on the front cover.
Awesome.
And I'm holding one of those polar white Ibanez musician basses.
Yeah, it's one of the ones I used to have.
Yeah. I mean, I love those. My favorite 4-string basses they are. So I'm holding that. And then Ibanez saw the magazine, and they said, wow, we love the fact that you, because obviously back in the old days, Sting was very well known for using Ibanez when he was with the Police. I think Adam Clayton from U2 was a big Ibanez user. I think even Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, Clayton. But since then, no one's really been associated with them. And they saw me with it, and they said, well, we love the fact you've drawn attention to our instruments. And they said, would you like to try some of the modern instruments out? And I also said, well, to be honest, I'm really happy with what I've got. Having said that, they were all 4 strings, my vintage ones.
Sure.
So I went to Ibanez UK, and they started to bring out these BTBs, which I post so much about.
Yeah, they're so great. Yep.
You know, and I said, you know, I really want like a 6-string or 2, and they brought them out, and I was completely knocked out with the quality of the, and BTB with Ibanez, apparently it stands for boutique bass, is what BTB means. And I just said, well, where have you been keeping these? Because I go into high street shops, and I'm not seeing any of these high-end Ibanez. I'm just seeing the student entry. Yeah. And they said, well, you know, this is what they're like, you know. So that's it. And I just started to use the modern day Ibanez BTB 6-strings, and I use some of the SR ones as well, and I still play my vintage ones. But yeah, the BTB 6-string Ibanez, I love them, and they're my main gigging basses now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about that series actually too is the necks are great on them, and oftentimes with the six strings for me, the necks have been like cumbersome, huge, and that's actually a super comfortable bass to play. And I'm talking to them about some of their headless stuff too, which is also pretty amazing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they are known. In fact, I mean, here's mine. I've just been working on the songs for our New Year's Eve TV show.
Right, and I was going to ask you about
that. I can't mention the people who are on it because one, well, I'll get in trouble, but two, the show might get cancelled.
Yeah, so that's actually his. It's the Hootenanny, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the Hootenanny started a year after the TV show. So I joined Jools 91. The TV show later with Jools Holland started in 92, and the Hootenanny started in 93.
And that's like basically the New Year's Eve show, right?
Yeah, exactly that. So, that's the latest one. So that's
amazing.
That's the headless one. But yeah, and their neck is like super comfortable. It's very flat. It's quite flat, which I really like, you know. But yeah, I've just been using this to work on the side. I'm not sure which bass I'm going to use on the show yet, because that's the other tricky thing, that there's so much varied stuff that we have to play on Jools' show.
Do you have a lot of basses there at the studio?
No, and that's a good point, because there isn't the space. And to be honest, if the show does go ahead this year, which it's due to do, we're going to have even less space because of the
social distancing. And that's a really, obviously the whole COVID thing has been really challenging, and I'm sure it's obviously it's messed with your schedule as it has with mine. But
we lost the summer tour with Jools. That went, although I was actually really busy this summer because I was in a lockdown band.
Yeah, you were in a house, right, or sort of a mansion, I guess.
I was living in two stately homes in Norfolk, in the east of England, and it was with a guitarist friend called Todd Sharpville, and he just decided that he didn't want to spend the whole summer in his London flat. So he, just before lockdown, the original one, he got together a bunch of musicians, like him on guitar, me on bass, drummer, and a keyboard player. We all got privately COVID tested.
Oh, okay.
Which is all paid for. And then, we moved into this stately home in Norfolk. We lived in two different ones. And we basically rehearsed, learned songs. We broadcast every Saturday night.
Amazing.
We ended up recording a couple of tracks with some very famous pop people. But again, I'm unfortunately not allowed to say who they were, but they're household name pop people. Because awesome. They heard what we were doing, and we did remote recording. They were in LA.
They were probably itching to get out and do something too, right? Just to do some kind of music. And
so and it was great fun. And eventually Lucy and Oscar came to join me, and it was great living in this beautiful big house with these the last place we stayed at was called Vowood, and it's got these beautiful big gardens. But the main thing is that we were making music the whole time. So actually I had a really busy summer, perversely, but normally,
that's great. Tell me, Lucy, your wife, so how long have you've been married now, for how many years?
Last year, in fact, we had our first wedding anniversary at the stately home.
Okay.
We were in Vowood. So we got married last August.
Awesome. Yeah, she's a beautiful girl, and she has an amazing voice. And she hasn't been singing professionally for very long, right?
No, not at all. I mean, we met 5 years ago, and I think she wasn't at all a professional singer. She just did it for fun. I think she had gone to one of those performing arts schools, but not as a full-time student, just as a weekend. So she'd done a bit of acting and a little bit of singing, but nothing at all remotely professional. And when we first met 5 years ago, we got chatting about music, and I didn't tell her what I did. I told her I was a musician, but I didn't tell her I played with Jools.
Yeah, the show and everything.
Yeah, I thought, let her discover that on her own. So I didn't want to put her off. But, she started to sort of read out all of these jazz greats, like Carmen McRae, Nina Simone, Sarah Vaughan, Julie London. I'm saying, because at the time Lucy was 19, she's a lot younger than I am. Yeah. And I said, how did you know?
You married well, Dave.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was worth the wait. And yeah, so that's her stuff. She's like an old soul, really. I mean, she's just turned 24.
She has a stunning voice. I mean, you guys were putting the videos out, 'cause that's part of how you sort of introduced her singing, and you were doing the bass and vocal videos, and I was like,
and that was just fun. That was just fun here at home, and and it got a great response, and then people started to sort of book us. In fact, we've got a gig this coming Sunday.
Oh, awesome.
We're doing a trio gig with our friend Thomas Solomon Gray, who's a great piano player. He was one of my best men at the wedding. But we've got a jazz gig on Sunday. But she was doing really well. She did her own EP, which I think is called Sometimes I'm Happy. It's still out there, and I'm playing acoustic bass on that, and it's great. And she's writing her own stuff as well. But
she's performing as it's Lucy Marilyn, right?
Yeah. So, well, Marilyn is actually her middle name.
Oh, okay.
So it's. I think some people think that's her surname, but no, Marilyn is just a middle name.
Just so folks can look her up.
Yeah. So Lucy Marilyn, is her professional name and stuff. And but yeah, I think we're going to do some more of those duo videos just for fun.
Yeah.
And actually, this summer, last year I took up the guitar as well because. I said to you when I studied with Michael Moore, he said how important it is for bass players or anyone who doesn't play a chordal instrument.
Mm-hmm.
He said how the importance of that,
Yeah.
So he said whether it's piano or guitar, he said it's really worth doing it if you don't already play a chordal instrument. It's because for me, I've been playing trombone and bass,
sure.
Neither one being technically chordal things. So. So I took up guitar last year, which I've been really getting into. But this summer, I also took up the tuba.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, because I always kind of fancy getting one. I'm thinking,
it's such a fun sound, right?
Oh yeah,
it kind of makes you like, oh, this is good.
Oh yeah. But you know what? There's some, if you do the research, there's some really serious jazz tuba play because most people just associate it with like an umpire band,
Right? Yeah, correct.
But if you look at there's some guys playing funk. And jazz. And
the Dixieland stuff is really fun.
Yeah. So, and I thought to myself, well, technically it is a bass instrument. Some people still call it a bass, and I just thought, I've got time on my hands. So add that to my working arsenal, So we might even do some duo videos with me on the tuba as well. So
that would be super fun.
But she's just going from strength to strength. It's a shame actually that just before COVID, her career really was this meteor.
Because you guys were actually working a lot in London and different places, right? Yeah.
She did her own show called The Legendary Ladies of Jazz, and it was with sort of bass, piano, and drums, and we played a gig called the Crazy Cocks in central London near Piccadilly Circus, and it was so well received, and her EP was going well. It literally was. Everything was going her way, and then of course COVID hit. But she, like myself, she likes to keep motivated. She's still learning more songs. She's adding to her repertoire.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I think with the COVID thing, that's part of the reason why I started the podcast series because I'm like, I could sit here and be bored and do nothing, or you can sort of reinvent yourself and find energy from a different place, which is kind of what I've been doing, I guess. But
also, the motivation thing, it's important because I do know a lot of people that sadly have stopped performing. They've made the decision. They tended to be players that weren't necessarily pro players. They were more semi-pros or whatever. But I just think if it's if it's what you've always done, it's in your blood. There's an obligation to. I mean, obviously, you've got to survive. The most important thing for anyone is survival. You've got to do whatever it takes. But I've been doing sort of interviews and podcasts, and I've been doing online teaching and stuff. But yeah, for me, it's just a great opportunity to work on your craft even more. So that when the gigs do come back in, you hit the ground running.
Exactly.
It's difficult if you're, especially for us, because we're used to touring a lot. I said we do these 2 big tours, and you become quite institutionalized. You get very used to that, and when that's not there,
you kind of get a little like I don't know what to do.
I guess like stir crazy is the kind of thing. It's everything is taken away from you. But for me, I just think I've always taken care of the craft first and foremost. So. I'm in my little music room here and I'm just surrounded by textbooks, CDs, all stuff to constantly work on, to keep motivated and to keep improving, and that for me keeps me very buoyant.
Yeah, I think the thing is too, like, I think we're the same because we talk a lot online and we both like to, I know you're also doing a lot of social media stuff, which is sort of part of the world we live in. But I think that's the idea of never stop learning, which it's just so important.
Yeah. And it's, exactly. And if it's something that you're that passionate about, you almost can't stop yourself. It's like,
yeah, because it's part of your soul. I mean,
it's when people were on the news and they were talking about retraining, and I'm thinking to myself, retrain? What on earth?
Yeah, that's like I'm 50 something years old. I've been doing this since I was.
Yeah, exactly. When I was a kid, the only things that I really thought about doing for a living, I adored basketball. I still do, and I played it a little bit at school. So I just thought to myself, well, if anything, I wanted to be a basketball player. So me at 56 retraining to be a pro basketball player? No, that's not going to happen.
Hey, you never know.
And I loved old horror movies. I'm one of my best friends.
Yeah, you're a huge horror fan. That's. Yeah.
So one of my best friends is Sarah Karloff, who's the daughter of the legendary horror actor Boris Karloff, who used to play the Frankenstein monster. So when I was a kid, I used to love Boris in those old films. So I was always trying to make myself look like one of those monsters. So like the makeup guys, the prosthetic guys in the movies. That's what I wanted to do as well when I was a kid. But even that, retraining for someone like that at my age, forget it. So really, I'm sticking with the music, and I'm just gonna,
Well, it's worked out okay for you, Dave.
It hasn't gone too badly so far.
Yeah, it's amazing that the longevity. So actually the later shows, how many years? It's been 28 years or?
Yeah. So if it started, where are we now? We're 2020. So it started in 1992.
It's amazing. Yeah, because if you think about it, I'm sure you have thought about it, but there's really only a handful of musicians that have ever been able to do a TV show that long. Will Lee comes to mind from the Letterman, but literally, there's literally probably this many guys.
People often used to, and it was very flattering because I know that Will is like just such a world class.
Yeah, he's a really sweet guy too. Really super nice guy.
I've never actually sort of met him, so I'd very much liked it. But people did used to compare my gig to his. That was the most similar thing they could find. And I guess,
of course, yeah.
And I guess the biggest difference was that he was on a chat show with a little bit of music.
Yeah, exactly.
A music show with a little bit of chat.
Right. Yeah.
But obviously quite similar. But yeah, it's been great, that show, because it's made me. I like to think I was quite a versatile musician anyway. I played upright, electric. I played trombone, and I played a lot of different stuff, but on Jools' show, it just broadened that. It just expanded that so much. The things I've had to be called upon to do, and it has definitely improved my musicianship.
Yeah, I think, that's the great thing about him is he has such a wide variety of tastes, and you can really tell that he, like when he has the classic, a lot of the old blues guys and that kind of thing, you can tell that's his element. He just loves that. You can really feel it,
it's a shame we don't have more jazz people on there, but to be honest with you, we have had, McCoy Tyner.
I was just watching that video. Yeah, it was amazing.
And Jimmy Cobb came on there. But in all honesty, the jazz thing on Jools' show doesn't always work that well because it is more of like, for want of a better term, a popular music show.
Sure.
So it definitely works if you've just, world music works, African, all kind of stuff. But sometimes if you get a hardcore jazz group on there, it's a little kind of weird. It's kind of a bit like trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole kind of thing.
I guess it's sort of like the producers know that Jools loves that, so they kind of we're gonna go for it. But you know what? That's awesome that they actually do that because, like you said, like the Africana thing. It's really a fun mix, and that's actually what I love about the show. Like it's a really fun, interesting mix of musicians and vibe, and
and also, a lot of people don't know about the radio show. The radio show that's probably been going like 20 years. But I think it's always overshadowed by the TV thing. But the radio show used to be nuts because when we had to play for the guests on there. So it's like an hour show. The first half an hour is just the rhythm section and Jools chatting away, playing whatever we want to play. Then the guest comes in and we do a song with them there and then the rest of the interview is them being interviewed about their lives.
Awesome.
But but we played with as many cool guests on the radio show as we did in the TV show. I mean, we had Amy Winehouse.
I know. Yeah, you mentioned it. Man, such a strong, interesting singer.
Oh yeah, she was amazing, and the first couple of times I worked with her, she was so much fun. The last time we played with her on the Hootenanny, when she's duetting with Paul Weller, that things had changed then. She wasn't who she was. Things had gone the other way. But we would have people come on the radio show, and we were never told what the song was going to be, so we had to learn the song in front of them.
Oh, how fun!
So the radio shows are pre-recorded. Okay, so. We do the first half and then we'd have a break. The artists would come in and then we'd kind of go, what are we playing? And their manager or MD would have a CD and they'd play it in the control room.
How funny.
We had to sit there and learn it in front of the artist. Now,
no pressure.
Oh my God, yeah. But the thing is, there isn't, like time-wise, it's not as like you know that you can't go for too long without learning it. You can't sort of say, "Oh, can we listen to it 6 more times?" It's like you've literally got to, if you can.
And the thing about it is that's not a small radio show. That's actually a huge radio show.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so you had to make sure that within either one listening of it, 2 maximum, that you could play the song. And we did that for years, and it was hugely pressurized thing.
Yeah.
But you know what?
It's amazing training though, right? For your ear. It's like
the best thing ever, because my ears just went zoing like this, because you had to listen around corners.
Sure.
You had to anticipate the stuff. So that was really, really good as well. So yeah, it's been a great experience, and it's one that I didn't ever see coming. And in fact, if you look at those early TV shows, I'm dressed so shabbily. I literally look as though I've been out doing the gardening.
How funny.
Or I've been under a car changing the oil. I just look terrible because I'd never been on TV before.
Yeah, it's a whole other world, right?
Yeah, and also, as my wife points out, I was single at the time. I didn't have a lady in my life. So there was no one to say to me, what are you doing?
What the hell are you wearing?
Scarecrow, what are you doing? So I'm there with these creased T-shirts and it's terrible. It took me years to realize, oh my God, I'm on the TV. I need to wear a suit.
Yeah, it's actually funny because you mentioned that, because if you watch the early Letterman stuff, because I grew up watching Letterman, and that was when I was in high school, was when that was first coming on, and it was sort of the same thing. Like they look like they just walking off the street wearing jeans and a T-shirt, and then over the years, as the money went up and they got, somebody probably said, hey, you guys actually need to sort of like dress better.
I know, but again, it goes back to me always thinking of the craft. I was much more concerned.
Yeah, you're focused on the music.
Yeah, but I do look back now and I say, oh God, what was I thinking of?
See, now I'm going to have to go back and find the early stuff.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Dave, how could people find you online? You've got your social pages and all that, but
well, I've got a website which is just simply daveswiftbass.com. And I'm also on Instagram as Dave Swift Bass, and I'm on Facebook as just Dave Swift.
So that's
I don't have a musician page. It's just just tall wall bloke.
Awesome. That's I really like. I love the fact that you interact. Actually, you're one of the administrators on my bass page, as bass players around the world, and you're frequently on there. And I love the fact that you're interacting with the bass community, the musicians community in general, and guys with your kind of experience. It's rare. And you're such a great teacher, and you explain things well, and you're always showcasing your instruments, and it's exciting. It's fun.
Oh, bless you. Well, it's kind of you to say, because at the end of the day, I still love what I do, and I am a bass nerd, and I am a bass geek.
I am too.
I love going to trade shows. I like going to sort of conventions and podcasts and that stuff. I don't know. I've just never gotten bored with it. I am so passionate about it. And when I started out, there weren't any bass teachers anywhere. Like I said, for me, it was a couple of Carol Kay books, and that was it. So obviously now there's a lot more resources available. But I just like to help people if I can. So I'm always happy to interact on social media with as long as I have the time. It's more difficult for me now. I have a family, but I still like to do it because, and especially when it comes to the gear that I'm using as well, because I made a lot of mistakes early on in my career, and I spent a lot of money which I needn't have spent. And it can be it can be quite a blow for like younger players if they're uncertain.
To spend $2,000 or $3,000 on something that's just not going to get them where they want to go.
Exactly that. So obviously right now, if you don't mind me mentioning that, I use Bergantino amplification.
Yeah, and they're great. That's great people. Good people.
And I'm so pleased with them because literally the things that are built into the amps. There's so much stuff in the B amp that I had a pedal board with all of these devices on there, and I got rid of the pedal board because everything's in the amp.
Yeah, and that's sort of like a dream for bass players. You already have to carry enough stuff, and it's like you can have one thing that does everything you need. That's gold, right?
Yeah, and working with a company where it's a very family-run thing with Jim and Holly Bergantino. And anything you want to know about, they'll answer your emails, they'll answer questions. They're the support.
Yeah, I just talked to them last night. I was trading messages with them at 3 a.m. on Instagram.
Oh yeah. In fact, it's Holly's birthday today.
Oh, okay, awesome.
This actual day, so I did send a message. But yeah, they're wonderful. I love their gear. I mean, my touring rig, I've not seen it since last year, because that stays with our crew out on tour. But I've got my studio rig here, which is the lightweight cabinets. But yeah, so I've got the Forte HP amp out on tour. I've got the B amp here at home, a mixture of cabs. So yeah, the Bergantino stuff for me is, I think that's it. I think I'm done for the rest of my career now. Yeah. I can't imagine moving on from that.
Yeah, I feel you on that situation too. And those guys, it's hard to find, the gear thing. I've done the same thing you have. I've had really expensive basses. I've had basses. I actually, for some reason, I've always tended to like the bolt-on Fender-ish. I mean, I was with Yamaha for a long time, which we talked about, and now I'm with Valenti, which is, he used to work with Sadowski, so it's sort of that Fender-ish thing, which always feels like home to me. But thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time. You've got such a story. We could actually probably go on for another 3 hours, and we talk, frequently online, and it's just fun to keep up with your energy. I love the positivity, and it's just great to see that. So I really want to thank you so much.
You have that too, so that it's great to, for me, because I feed off that from you too. You're similar in that way. You have that positivity and that enthusiasm and that kind of, always moving forward.
Well, I try. I don't always succeed, but I try. But we'll put, for the people that are watching this, we're going to put Dave's links on the podcast information. So check that out. Please check him out on Instagram, on Facebook, send him a friend's like, and you'll see him also on our bass page, bass players around the world. And
I do have, sorry to interrupt, I do have a YouTube as well.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I think it's just Dave. If you just go onto YouTube and you just type in Dave Swift, you'll see all my videos. So there's a lot of the stuff from my appearances with Jools on his TV shows.
Yeah, and also too, I should mention that the Jools shows, many of them actually are on YouTube, so you can check that out, and they're all great. I mean, you guys are backing up a lot of people. Also, a lot of the bands that are on there, it's all amazing stuff. It's just awesome. But thank you so much, Dave. I really, really appreciate it.
The pleasure's all mine, I can assure you.
Awesome. We'll talk to you soon. And everybody, please check out the podcast, all the different episodes. We're building a good catalog now. A lot of bass players, but also people that aren't bass players. But we have some exciting guests coming up. So thank you so much, Dave.
My pleasure.
Awesome.